Okay, Chair, we're live.
Thank you, Wyn. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Committee. It's nice to see so many faces here at my committee today, and welcome to any members of the public and press who are watching. Going to crack straight on. We've got one main agenda item, but before we get to that, have we got any apologies, please, Wyn?
Yes, Chair, we've got a few county councillors, Gareth Morgan, Karina Kenyon-Wade on other council business, portfolio holder, Councillor Sandra Davis, and from Carwynton, the Chief Exec.
Okie doke, thank you. Any declarations of interest, please, members? No. Disclosure of party whips. Anyone here a whip for their party? No. Okay, item 4, minutes from the December meeting, I think it is. Yep, I've had a review of these and was fairly happy. Quite clearly records the recommendations we made in the outcomes. Did anyone have any comments or amendments of these? Where would I see hands, Wyn? Would it just pop up over their name?
If you open your participants box, if you look
Yeah.
at the participants list at the bottom,
Yeah, okay,
then
right.
they should appear then.
If no one's got any comments to make on the minutes from December, please can I have a proposer and a seconder?
I'm happy to propose, Amanda.
Thanks, Councillor
Second.
Gareth. Was that Chris?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Did you catch those, Wyn? Yep. Did you get those, Wyn? Yeah, I think you must have. Okay. Okay, right. Item 5 is the Corporate Safeguarding Report and Action Plan. Welcome to officers and portfolio holders who have joined us today. We've got Nina Davis, Lynette Lovell, and I can see Councillor Sian Cox and Councillor Richard Church. Welcome to committee. Thanks for joining us. Councillor Richard, I understand that you're going to be introducing this item and then handing over to officers who can give us a bit of an update on the history of when this happened and what's happened since. So on that note, I will just hand straight over to you. I'm sure that the members of the committee have read this and will have questions, but I'll let you present and introduce it, and then we'll come to questions in bulk rather than going through it item by item, if you like. So, Councillor Richard.
Thank you, Amanda. Just to give a bit of context to this in introducing it, the committee will be aware that we had an Audit Wales review of our corporate safeguarding last year, which reported to the council in December. And it made a number of recommendations which are included in this report in how we should improve our corporate safeguarding arrangements. We had already, even before the report became public, started work on implementing many of these recommendations. Perhaps the most important one of those was to agree a corporate safeguarding policy, which I recall was considered by this scrutiny committee, who made some recommendations on it, and then confirmed by Cabinet around about the turn of the year. And we have also noted the recommendations concerning training, and we put in place a training campaign, I think you could describe it as, to improve the level of training within the authority of both members and staff. And we've now seen a significant improvement in the level of training, and amongst members we're now at 98%, which is a huge improvement on where we were when I took this role on back last summer. I'll allow Nina to go through the report in detail. I think the other point I want to make going forward is that we want to now embed corporate safeguarding as a key consideration of everything that we do going forward. So when it comes to our self-assessment of our performance within all of the services of the council, we will consider corporate safeguarding as one of the key issues that we want every service of the council to consider. So this isn't just a one-off, it's something that we want to drive through and embed in the organisation on a permanent basis going forward. So with that, I'll hand over to Nina.
Thank you, Richard. Nina.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Richard, for introducing the report in front of Scrutiny Committee this morning. At a previous scrutiny meeting, we did discuss the work ongoing to make improvements in this area. And since that last meeting with yourselves, Wales Audit Office have published their final report. I think the date was the 19th of December. That report and the action plan that has been put together by corporately has been discussed at the Governance and Audit Committee on the 9th of February and at Corporate Safeguarding Group on the 16th of March. When Councillor Richard and myself took on responsibility for corporate safeguarding last summer, it was immediately clear that there was a lot of work to do and urgent actions to be completed. At that time, we drafted an action plan and started to implement that plan with immediate effect, working corporately across all services. The engagement from across the council, from Cabinet, from yourselves to Scrutiny has been really positive, and it's been supported by a cross-service working group. My thanks go to everyone who's been involved with this work over that time scale. Firstly, I would like to thank Audit Wales for their work and for their findings. We welcome and accept all the recommendations outlined in their report. At the time of the publication of the report by Audit Wales in December.
Oh, sorry, Nina. Members,
okay.
if you're not speaking, can you put your Councillor Gareth?
Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Gareth, please, can you put your microphone on mute?
Sorry.
That's okay. If you're not speaking, please, can we have microphones on mute, please? Sorry, Nina, carry on.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. Just to recap, the Council welcomes and accepts all of the recommendations outlined in the Wales Audit Report in front of you today. At the time of the publication of the report by Audit Wales in December, we were assured to see that progress had already been made against all of the recommendations, and today many of the actions have been completed or have had significant progress achieved against them. I think it's really important to note that all of the actions and the recommendations from this work have been added to the corporate regulatory tracker, which means they will be monitored through the quarterly performance monitoring arrangements that are in place, governance arrangements for the council, as well as through safeguarding channels. I just think it's important to just highlight and remind everybody here today that the Audit Wales report in front of you is about corporate safeguarding arrangements, and it is not a report looking at safeguarding arrangements in any individual services. As the Wales Audit Office report states, this is not a review of specific safeguarding arrangements in education or social services. So the current action plan is the first step. I acknowledge there is more to do, but can give you the assurance that we now have robust governance processes and procedures in place to continue to support this improvement journey. Safeguarding is a priority for Powys County Council, and it is all of our responsibility. I understand we don't want to go through the action plan in detail, so Chair, I'll just go through a couple of the main highlights, if I may.
Thank you.
Firstly, a corporate safeguarding policy. One of the first things we identified that there was no overarching corporate safeguarding policy in place. We drafted, worked across services through the autumn, and a policy was approved by Cabinet on the 13th of December. My thanks go to Scrutiny for your valuable feedback and input into that process. Also created was a one-page summary, which showed all the key information on one page. The policy is on the central repository along with a refresh date, so that it'll be automatic reminders will be in place for when that policy needs to be reviewed. Again, really important in terms of embedding safeguarding and making sure this stays a top priority for the council moving forward. Next, the terms of reference for the Corporate Safeguarding Board was reviewed, refreshed and improved on the 5th of December. Communication of safeguarding was seen as an area that needed improvement, and landing pages on the public website and the internal intranet regarding safeguarding went live in February, and there has been corporate communications about those pages. As well as one of the suggestions around improving communication that came from yourselves at Scrutiny was a suggestion to have a safeguarding theme per month. This suggestion was taken to the corporate safeguarding group at our last meeting and agreed that it will be a really good positive step forward, and it is on the agenda for June to put forward a programme of monthly themes in terms of safeguarding. I'll just add in here, if I may, Chair, that we've added to the agenda for the corporate safeguarding groups feedback from yourselves as a scrutiny committee. So we're making sure we've got that feedback loop embedded into this structure to make sure that everything that you're suggesting is picked up on and acted upon by that group. Internal audit are currently coming to the end of a audit piece of work on safer recruitment, DBS. That audit work started in November. And I've also met with SWAP this week to agree a rolling work programme to ensure that safeguarding is included on the future internal audit programmes as well. So that'll be something coming to you in the future as well, that future programme. As Councillor Richard alluded to earlier, it's really important that safeguarding is incorporated, embedded across all services of the council. So how we've dealt with this is we've worked with the team to make sure that safeguarding is included within the annual self-evaluation work that all services undertake. So this will really make sure that we've got a really robust and established reporting mechanism in place for safeguarding, and will also help with getting the information together from all services for the annual report that will be written in terms of safeguarding. And just to let committee know that self-evaluation progress is ongoing now. So heads of service are currently working with their senior teams to put together that self-evaluation information into workbooks. And then those workbooks will be taken forward, and there will be panels with Cabinet and EMT looking at those information, and the safeguarding information will be included within that. Recommendation 5 of the action plan notes that previously there were 2 DBS policies in place. This has been reviewed, and I can now confirm that Powys County Council now only has 1 DBS policy, so that recommendation and action has been completed. Recommendation 6 was to produce guidance on the recruitment of volunteers. And I can provide you with an update that work is ongoing to put together a corporate volunteering policy, and it's going to be adopted within the next couple of months. So that'll be something we'll be able to bring to you at a future meeting. Recommendation was about a new contract management, and a new approach is being developed, which will be setting out how the council manages its contracts with regard to contract performance, which will include ensuring safeguarding practices and controls are in place. So that work is making really good progress, and again, something we can look at with you in the future. Recommendation 8 is about mandatory training, and as Councillor Richard has already said, we have seen an improvement with mandatory safeguarding training across both staff and councillors. So that's an improvement picture, but obviously we won't take the foot off the pedal, and we'll keep making sure that we drive that forward. And then recommendation 9 is providers are going to be expected to provide safeguarding training to employees in accordance with Compass guidelines. So the council will be reconfirming this expectation and monitoring it through the new contract management framework approach that I referenced earlier. So Councillor Amanda, Chair, just a quick whistle-stop tour through the main highlights of this work, but happy now to move to answering any questions that you and the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Richard. Councillors, I'm sure you've got questions. Nina, you've actually answered my question, which was going to be, obviously, I know that we'd made recommendations previously, and how did we ensure that they were captured and tracked and taken forward? So that's my question. I may have more, but councillors, please raise your hand if you've got a question, and I can see that a couple of you do already. Liz, I think you were first. Councillor Liz Weidenberg.
Well, thank you, Nina, and thank you, Richard. And That was a very assuring, comprehensive overview, Nina, so thank you for that. It does seem that almost everything, you know, is in hand in terms of the governance of the corporate safeguarding. I just got one small question. I know Councillor Richard said that 98% of staff of councillors were already covered on safeguarding, which is excellent. Is there a percentage figure for the rest of the workforce?
Yes, there absolutely is, Councillor Liz. I think a couple of weeks ago we were at 78%, but if you give me a few minutes, I might be able to get an updated figure for you during the meeting. But if I can't, I will provide that after the meeting. But it's an improving position, and I'll get the updated figure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question related to that, Nina. When we last discussed this, we also talked about providing that training in more accessible formats for those that may not be on the computer all the time. Has that taken place as well?
Yes, that was discussed at the last Corporate Safeguarding Board as well. And I think we were looking at how we can, you know, get out and reach frontline staff, etc. You know, those who, quite a lot of people don't have access to computers or don't work on computers, isn't it, as part of their day job. So I think work's still ongoing with that, but I can certainly bring that as part of my next update to you as a scrutiny from Paul Bradshaw and the team. But I know it's something that we have discussed and they were looking at. So I will have to provide an update in future on that.
Thanks, Nina. Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nina and Richard, for you know, a comprehensive overview of the report. I am going back and some of these questions I know that we asked previously. It's interesting that I had exactly the same question that Liz had put down about the percentage uplift in relation to members training. And I think it was an important point that you made, that this is a corporate review and not of a Pacific service, because that would give us, I think, more concerns if it was around a Pacific service, although this is still concerning. I just want to go back to page, where is it? It's 24 in my pack, where there are what we found comes up, and there's a statement there under point 5 where they say, concerningly, the council still does not have a proper control of its corporate safeguarding arrangements, which exposes both the council and its residents to risks. I put a question down, is that statement now still true? And you're going to tell me that it's not, it's much more improved. And I'm just looking for that reassurance in relation to that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Chris. My opinion is that statement is no longer true. I think a significant amount of work has happened since last summer around corporate safeguarding, and that has been a corporate response across services, and that's really important, because safeguarding, it's not for social services or education, it's everybody's responsibility as staff, as members. So I think, no, in my opinion, and that's all it can be, obviously, I don't think that statement no longer is true. And I think we've made really good steps as well, not just with immediate actions, but to ensure that safeguarding is embedded and sustained, and the focus and prioritization of it is focused and sustained as well. And so by making sure that safeguarding is now covered within the annual self-evaluation work that all services have to complete, I think that's a real strength and a real positive, to make sure that things don't slip in the future as well, and that as a council we stay on top of safeguarding moving forward. I hope that provides you the assurance that you were perhaps hoping for, Councillor Chris.
Yes, it does, and again, I just think it's important to go back to the original findings and then say to yourself, have we improved, and can we demonstrate that improvement? Yeah. I come out with the same conclusion as yourself, which I think is a reassurance. But to me, then there needs to be around accountability arrangements, because this report is dating back to 2014, 2015. So there's no criticism in relation to anyone that is currently involved. But I think that we need to look at, there was a report that came out a number of years ago, organisations with a memory. And I believe we need to do some reflections, and I hope certainly that the corporate safeguarding group are doing this in relation, because on page 25 of the report, it says the role of the corporate safeguarding group. The group is not properly fulfilling its own responsibilities. Now, to me, if I had that and I was sat on a group, I would be then saying, why haven't I been doing my responsibility as a part of it? And I would like to see that there is certainly some self-reflection going on there and lessons learned, so that we don't get ourselves into a position of this type of report coming back again going forward. So it's about learning from past mistakes on there. And the publishing of the policy, you've got a 3-year review. Is that best practice for policies around safeguarding, or is there recommendations from higher bodies and stuff on there, what in relation to Welsh Assembly Government in relation to reviewing policies? Because a 3-year, lots of things can happen and change, and I hope that it's going to be reviewed more regularly than that. And I'll stop there, Chair. I could spend a long time asking loads of questions, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. You're absolutely right that, you know, one of the things that the Audit Wales report picked up on, and in fact we had already picked up on before that report was received, is that the board was not following its own terms of reference. So that was a piece of work that was to review the terms of reference to make sure that they were appropriate and taking into account, you know, the responsibilities and appropriate responsibilities in line with the new policy as well. So that work was completed in December as well. I think that's a really good point about, you know, the lessons learned and the reflection. So I will take that as an action back to the Corporate Safeguarding Board as a suggestion that we undertake that piece of work perhaps looking at lessons learned and ensuring, you know, that we don't end up in this situation again. But as you note, you know, there is different people now with responsibility for this. But I think it's an important question, so I'll take that back to the group. Thank you. In terms of the 3-year policy, there is always, you know, you can absolutely review as and when required policies. You know, the 3 years would be the maximum that we would leave before reviewing it. But I think you're right. I think it's probably feels that as a board we do consider just having a check and a review of that policy perhaps more frequently. But the policy and refresh date was we followed all guidance and you know, recommendations for that policy, and we also we looked at best practice from some other local authorities as well. So we kind of took information from a number of different sources to shape that policy and the refresh date, etc. But you know, you're absolutely right. If things need to be reviewed and refreshed before that 3 years, they should absolutely do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks both. I can see that Richard might want to come in on this. Can I just ask though, before I ask Richard just to come in, the corporate safeguarding group that was set up, how long had that been in establishment for? From memory, and I may be wrong, so please correct me, was it in place before the CIW inspection in 2017, or was it something that was set up after that?
I'm sorry, Chair, I don't know the answer to that. Could you leave that with me?
Yeah.
I don't know if Lynette knows on the call. It's not something I was involved with at that time, so I wouldn't want to hazard a guess, but I'm happy to go away and find out the answer for you.
Yeah, okay. And yeah, I'd also like to know then, in terms of the governance of their terms of reference, how that was sort of established, because just from memory, and I may be wrong, I think that was put in place after the CIW inspection report.
Right.
So it's not, it potentially isn't a group that's sat for years and years, and so without being too critical to them as a group, it's had only been embedded for a few years, and so obviously it needs to reflect on it. But I just want to check that point, really, just so that we're clear. It's not been a committee that should have had loads of experience, etc. Richard, do you want to come in on that?
Well, I really wanted to come in on the question of risk, because you can never 100% eliminate a risk of safeguarding being breached. There is always an element of risk. I don't want to disagree with how Nina responded to this question. I think we can now say that we have managed the risk to substantially reduce it, but we can never sit back on this one. You can't say it's all done, because it never is. We have staff joining and leaving all the while, and there is turnover within the organisation and changes of circumstances. So we need to keep pressing on it, and I view that as my job as the lead within Cabinet on the matter, to be continually reminding my colleagues of this, to keep it in mind, to keep it in profile all the while. And I'm sure Nina does the same within the organisation as a whole. I'm not going to comment on what went before, because I wasn't a councillor and I haven't got a clue. I can only deal with the situation as we found it last year, and the need to drive it forward from now on. But I think Scrutiny has every right now to ensure that myself and Nina continue to keep the profile going and to continue to keep pushing on this, because, as I said before, the job is never done.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. My first question follows on from the comments that both Chris and Richard has just said. At the start of the report that Nina's done, there's 2 tables, key features and scrutiny, and both say tick all that apply, but risk, either corporate risk, strategic work, or risk to public and other service isn't ticked. And I would have thought that should have been areas that should have been ticked around this report, in my view. Can I also then follow on with Nina said about each service being asked to do some work on this? Does that include the school's delegated budget? And also, what areas of volunteering is being covered by the policy? Does that include, for example, the volunteers in rights away, etc.?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gareth. The volunteers policy that's been looked at the moment is corporate, so it'll be covering all volunteers across all service areas. So yes, it would include the rights away, because of course Countryside Volunteers has a very large and very successful volunteer group. I think there's more than 200 volunteers. I think there's a local service policy already in place, but what's happening now is we're putting in the overarching corporate volunteer. The second question was about schools' delegated budget, wasn't it? I know that Lynette's on the call. Would it be okay, Councillor Gareth, if I asked Lynette to perhaps answer that question?
That'd be fine.
Lynette.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of schools' delegated budgets, for example, all schools have a governing body. All schools have to have a safeguarding policy of their own, approved annually, actually, by the governing body in schools. All of that is in hand, checked every year by our school improvement advisors who work with our schools to ensure those policies are in place. There's an expectation for schools that safeguarding policy is available all the time on their websites for the school, etc. So within the governing bodies, the expectation there is, and just to note as well, in the safeguarding audit that came out, education and social services as individual service areas were not part of the concerns that this report brought forward. So there are checks and measures in places for schools to ensure all of that safeguarding training, and that has to be covered annually, or whatever that may be. And as I say, the safeguarding policy is updated in schools annually. Thanks, Councillor Gareth.
So just a quick follow on. So does the 78% of staff that undertake the mandatory training include school staff?
No, it doesn't, Councillor Gareth. No, it doesn't include school staff.
Can I ask why not?
So all of the central training, corporate training, we do separately at schools. We do have a safeguarding training in our schools, and that is at 100% for our schools, for example. But it doesn't feature on the corporate figures. But possibly it could in the future, in the system. But the school staff do not feature on the 78% of corporate staff.
Okay.
Do we think we want to make a recommendation on that point, Councillor Gareth? Do you think it should?
Personally, I think if you're saying the report says all staff, so it should include all staff.
I also
And likewise, when you get out to volunteers, in my mind, governors are volunteers. Now,
Yep.
Any requirement there should include governors as well.
Absolutely. I think I agree with that as well. And not just governors, but also those that come in to do extra curricular stuff with children after school. We have people coming in from football camps, etc. Lynette, do you want to come back on that?
Back in on that one, that all school volunteers are DBS checked, etc., and we have that information centrally, and we hold that within education, just so that you know that does happen.
But what about them being able to do some of this training?
Yeah, I think that's a really good recommendation to move forward at the moment. The volunteers, they're DBS check, but I think going forward, some of the training would be something we could take from this committee today. Really good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because knowing some of the more subtle signs of children who are at risk, it's not always an obvious thing, is it? And anyone who can do that training, I'm sure would benefit from it. And I know I've mentioned to Nina before about safeguarding in sport, and also I would like that training, even if it's not, we can't mandate it, but for it to be accessible to anybody who comes into contact with children where we have even the most minor connection point. For example, we have a relationship with Flash, with Freedom Leisure, and we have all kinds of volunteers that run sports clubs there, who come into contact with children. Just to give you a practical example, there's a huge football club at Welshpool where some parents stay and some parents don't stay. Do those parents know who, would those parents feel reassured if they knew that those people training their children have had access to this training? I think they would. I would like, everybody to have access to it. So I think we can think outside the box a little bit in terms of spreading this awareness. And I'd love to see that reach over into sport, which I know is something I've harped on about before, and I'll shut up now. But has anyone else got any questions? Councillor Chris.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going through and I note something that Richard had commented before about you can't eliminate risk. And it's a statement I agree with. Risk will always be there, but it's how we actually mitigate on it. Coming through, I just come to page 36 of the pack, and there is a statement that's in there from Welsh Audit that says safeguarding does not feature on education risk registers, but the council state they are regularly meetings with the designated leads for safeguarding. Now, just building on from what Gareth was saying around risk, again, that statement to me is quite concerning, because that's representing around corporate culture and about the acceptance of managing risk and safeguarding activity. And it builds on to the initial question that Liz started off with around training. By you giving staff training, you start to mitigate those risk issues down. And this is why it's important that it needs to be reflected across a whole thing on there. And again, I just put a comment, reassure me that this has been corrected, because within an educational context, and I don't sit on any of those scrutinies or events, please reassure me that this has been covered off and is a considered risk within the, because if it's not, that is a worry. And then the other one then is a little bugbear of mine. I've seen this a number of times about this Welsh Community Care Information System. Do we have any update of whether that's going to be replaced? Because there was some work going on, if I recall rightly, that there was an internal system being looked at, and I just wondered whether that had been progressed any further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. I'll ask Lynette to come in and respond in terms of the education risk register, but I would just add that the designated lead for safeguarding for education is a regular attender. He's always attends the corporate safeguarding board, and brings really real positive contribution and reports there and items for discussion. So just to reassure you that you know, education in schools is absolutely high up on the agenda as part of the corporate safeguarding work. I'll leave Lynette to comment on the risk register work, but just in terms of WCCIS, yep, that work, there is a digital transformation project ongoing at the moment. As part of that work, we are looking at reviewing what the potential options are for the data management system for social care and for sharing information with key partners. So that's because the contract comes to an end. So it's right, you know, as a commissioning council, that we are taking due diligence and looking at all the potential options in the future. So that work is ongoing, Councillor Chris, and there will be an options report coming forward. I don't have the exact date, but I think it is within the next couple of months. So just to reassure you that that work is ongoing. And then if it's okay, I could ask Lynette to come in perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Yes, Councillor Chris, just to give you reassurance there in terms of the education, the work is undertaken there. You know, we do identify the risk. We have service risk registers. So whilst the corporate risk register, things are escalated, but at the service risk register, and as Nina said, we have a designated safeguarding lead who is fully active with our schools. At the schools, identify that the support they get from the council, from our safeguarding lead, is thorough and robust, and all of that is in hand. So thank you very much for that, but I can give you the assurance today.
Thank you.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, just on that point, I raised an issue recently around schools, and I can confirm that the safeguarding officer from the school service is very proactive and very quick in the response that I received. Can I just make a couple of comments on the proposed action plans? On recommendation 3, there's an action there of, it just says improve communication, which to me there's communication is mentioned in other recommendations with more detail, but improved communication doesn't mean a lot to me. Just seeing a little bit more details in some areas around that.
Yeah, just an observation on that one as well. Since then, obviously, you've updated the website, haven't you? So there's a whole section on corporate safeguarding. Maybe you need to include that in what you've done so far in your ongoing tracking of your actions.
Yeah, that is mentioned elsewhere, Chair.
Is that mentioned, is it?
I think, but not sure where. So
just from looking on that website, you know, it's got the policy on there, it's got who's responsible for what, it's got governance details, picture and contact details of Nina and Richard, and then also all the details of how the public can report things. So I right, Nina, that wasn't up before the end of last year? You're on mute, Nina.
Chair, yes, you're absolutely right. Those pages went live in February of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Gareth. I take on board that point under recommendation 3, and we'll take an action away to increase the text there, increase the information. So yeah, no, thank you for that.
Thank you.
and just to be fair to yourselves, to showcase what you've done as well.
Absolutely, thank you.
Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, could I just not make a, it's not a question, Chair, it's more an observation, or perhaps it is a question. I realise that both staff, officers and members with responsibility safeguarding has changed since the two previous reports, 214, 215. My question is that, has anybody actually done any reflection on why the follow-ups to the action plans and recommendations made by the Audit Committee or Welsh Audit Office on both of those reports have not been completed, as shown in this latest report from the Welsh Audit Office?
Thank you, Councillor Gareth. As I said earlier, in response to Councillor Chris's question, I think that's a good challenge, and I'll take that back to the corporate safeguarding group with a suggestion that we take some time to reflect on that and the fact that those audit reports weren't fully responded to. So I'll take that away as an action, as a future piece of work to undertake. Thank you.
Councillor Gareth, I think that's why also I was asking about when some of these initial corporate parenting initiatives started, because I like sort of speculation, but I'm wondering whether or not these came at a time when there were post the education and children's inspection report, where there was a tremendous amount of improvement work in various departments put in place, and so perhaps it fits within the context of something that was started at the same time of lots of other improvement journey stuff, and now we are making sure that this particular part of that is improving. So that's why I think, you know, within the reflection, it would be good to reflect within the reflection what the timelines were, just to be fair to the council on that point. Can I ask then, as a final question, Nina, what's next for us? One thing that I have personally reflected on is I was, as just in the interest of transparency, I was interviewed as part of this audit, which I was fairly candid and honest about in terms of the committee's involvement in corporate safeguarding, which I think is fairly reflective in the recommendations. After that, I have spoken with officers to ensure that going forward, we have clearer terms of reference for this committee, because I think we need to be clear what's within our remit and what isn't. And I'm hoping that our remit in terms of corporate safeguarding is going to be much more set out within those terms of reference. So that's something that I've done. So what's next, Nina, for us? When do you guys come back to us, and what's our sort of involvement in this on a review basis?
Thank you, Councillor Amanda. Yes, as healthcare scrutiny, you know, you have a key role in this moving forward. After every corporate safeguarding board meeting, you will be having an update. So by the time you have your next scrutiny meeting, I think you'll have the board update ready to go. So you will be having regular updates from those. If there is particular policies or etc. that will be coming through, I will be recommending or asking that you as a scrutiny committee look at those, because I think that was really important as part of your safeguarding role as well. But also, there's a couple of really big key pieces of work. Is the annual self-evaluation work, which includes safeguarding. We'll be pulling out the safeguarding information from that self-evaluation work, and I would hope that we'd be able to have the opportunity to bring that here to you as a committee. And then, of course, there's the annual report. Now, I'm looking to include that safeguarding within the annual director's report, make sure, again, making it more robust, that is part of an existing governance process and procedure. So throughout the year, there'll be some big kind of checkpoints, I think, for you as a scrutiny to be involved in your oversight role in terms of safeguarding, but also there will be those regular quarterly updates as well from the board moving forward. But equally, happy to take on board your requests and suggestions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously we've now got our scrutiny tracker in place. So the recommendations from today will be going on there. And just from memory, those were to include the stats for education within the overall stats. Also to see whether we can offer training, safeguarding training out more widely to volunteers, not just within education setting, but anywhere where we where there is even, you know, a small relationship with the council in terms of buildings and or other relationships. Any other recommendations that I've missed? Councillor Gareth, you're usually on the ball with these.
I made the note that we should also include governors and
Yes.
other volunteers in schools. And I've also just added one, Chair, that around the follow-up from the 2 previous audits, not that it should be intensive, but, you know, just to get a guide, you know, get an understanding why perhaps the follow-up wasn't actioned.
Yeah, I think it would be good for us to know that history. I agree. Okay, well, thank you for bringing that to scrutiny today, to portfolio holders and officers. Really appreciate it. And it's up to you whether you want to stay for our next agenda item or not. I'm sure you have got lots of busy things to do. So thank you, and I'll you feel free to go. And right, we're moving on to item 6, which is to appoint 2 members to the Joint Leisure Working Group, which is a group that's going to be led by the Economy, Communities and Residents Scrutiny Committee, but it's got representation members representing our committee and also education. That's right, isn't it, Wyn?
That's correct, Chair.
So I know of someone who has got an interest in this. Does that person want to raise a hand and say it, or if I see silence, I'm happy. Yes, there we go. Councillor Gareth, I know that you've got an interest in this. Would you just like to share that with the group?
Yeah, just for the other members, in my previous life, I was a senior manager within school service, and I was involved in initial contractual discussions of putting leisure services out. So I have some understanding of that. But I think also by being part of this committee, I think leisure services, there's a very key link to the health and well-being of the people of Powys. I'm also the council represented on the local access forum, which is the rights of ways, etc. So in some ways, I can see a triangulation between the roles I take within the authority. So I'd be happy to be one of our members on that committee if that was welcomed by others.
And can I would absolutely welcome that, Gareth. I think you'd bring good experience. Can I ask when this working group, what's its remit? Are they looking at specific leisure centres or leisure as a whole? What do we know?
Not a lot at the moment, Chair. I think it's looking at it's doing a whole review. I think following what happened last year, I think it's doing a whole review of leisure centres and the recommendations. Obviously, that work is starting. The aim is that this group will then track what's going on and make comment back on it, report back to Economy Committee, which will then make recommendations to the Cabinet when the final proposals, whatever they may be, come to Cabinet at some point this year, I'm thinking.
Okay. Does anybody, I mean, I know this is obviously you'll be going to this working group with your scrutiny member hat on rather than as a local member, but does anyone have an interest in this because they've got a leisure centre in their ward? No. Chris?
I think it's important. I mean, obviously Brecon has a leisure centre. On the most of them do. I'm looking at my capacity to be able to engage. I'm in so much stuff. It's just finding that time to be able to add key value. To me, though, I hope, and maybe through Wyn this can be reflected back in, is what about partnerships with other key players? To me, the health board would be a key link into this, because a decision that we make as a council in relation to how this service develops could have a huge influence in relation to health more broadly. And that will then have impacts on other parts of the service, you know, elsewhere in the services, because to me it's about prevention, and health, leisure centres is a part of a preventative type of service on there. So we reduce then the impacts elsewhere within the system, which gives you more capacity to be able to deal with things. To me, I also heard recently about, you know, health shouldn't be in isolation with like social care. It needs to come more integrated and come together, because by doing that, we will increase capacity going forward, because we won't be duplicating efforts. I mean, the conversation we've just had about training, for example, by you sharing training, you share ideas around culture and also about lessons learned, how they deal with stuff, and we can then match things up, but it reduces your costs down as well. I would love to say I'd like to get engaged in it, but I've just got no capacity to do it, honestly.
Well, I'm happy to do it if no one has got a burning desire to do it, but I'd like to know how often is it going to sit, and do we know what days of the week? I can see Councillor Liz has got a hand up, and Josie, I thought you had your hand up, but it's gone back down. Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to say, on the basis that we do have a leisure centre in Christenau ward, and I'm assuming that, although I don't know for sure, that this is going to be a task and finish job, you know, looking at you know, the issues that were raised from last year and trying to find a way forward. I will be happy to join Gareth and sit on that group.
Okay, great. Josie?
Thanks, Chair. I do have a swimming pool and leisure centre within my ward, but a little bit like Chris, I'm just concerned about my working hours at the moment.
Okay.
Chair, if we could find out some more information, I would be happy to put myself forward to sit on that. But again, with working and other bits and pieces, I'm just a bit reluctant to take much on at the moment.
Okay, well, Liz has just put her name forward, so yeah, so I think we've got 2 people, and that's you know, that's what we need to do. We can always change, and depending on when we know more, it may be that we think maybe someone else might be better to go on the group because of a local issue, for example, or their knowledge. So I'm happy for it to be a flexible thing moving forward. But thank you to Councillor Gareth and Councillor Liz for saying that you'll go on it. Because I do think, you know, if you've got one in your ward, that brings in an element of, you know, you can give examples from what you know happens at your local leisure centre. So yeah, that's have you got that? Have you got a note of that? Those 2 then, Wyn?
I have, thanks. And just picking up some of the points in terms of Councillor Chris's comments, I think that's something, obviously the leisure review should be talking to partners. You know, there's a big link up to education, there's a big link up to health.
Yeah.
And part of the scrutiny role will be to look at what's happened, who's been talked to, what's the outcome been, how was that fed back into any final proposals? So it covers the whole basis. In relation to workload, we don't know as yet. We're going through the motions at the moment of getting all the scrutiny committees to appoint members to it. I understand that economy and residents are working on, or the chair may be working on, the terms of reference for this group. So then I think it's going to be driven as well by how often or what's happening in the review itself and how soon that will come to the fore. So there may not be much activity until probably next month at the earliest, and then we'll see how it pans out in terms of deadlines, and hopefully we can be guided then from officers from leisure and the portfolio holder as to how often we need to meet when scrutiny gets involved in the process. Because I don't know as yet when the likely outcome of this is going to Cabinet.
Okay, and in terms of this review then also, you know, we need to know what information is going to this working group, because last year I'd asked a question about whether or not they'd considered people who were within our remit in adults and children's social services who may access leisure facilities, perhaps because that's part of their support packages that they are received or that they've been signposted to. Anyone who is under support from occupational therapists who may be doing rehab and also receiving social care support at the same time. You know, we didn't have that information then, and when Gareth and Liz go to these groups, they'll be going with the health and social care hat on. So it's important that they have the information when they're there that allows them to have that focus rather than it just being really high level and general.
Yeah.
Because we need to make sure that we're making a difference on that group in terms of our remit as our scrutiny committee. So I'll leave that sort of just as an observation, and I can see Sian is nodding, and hopefully there'll be some triangulation of all of this, and we'll get some more information back to us before it starts. And I think that's it. Work programme is the sort of last item on the agenda. Can we move that into the reflection section, when just because there's a couple of points that I just want to ask members about, and just have a general chat about planned laming visits as well, and that's all relevant to the work programme. I don't think the public need to hear that.
If you're happy on that bit, that's fine, Chair. The other thing I was going to show you as well was I've sent an email out, but just give you a quick 2-minute look through the informal tracker so you can see what it looks like. And in fact, the formal tracker as well, so you can see both of those to see what they look like, and then we can have a discussion on that. And the other thing I was going to show, if Councillor Gareth, is he still on the call?
I am indeed. No, Gareth, no, he's gone.
He's actually gone. Right.
Yeah.
I was just going to show you very quickly how to do the download of the
that'd be
the link from the invite into your calendars. It's a 2-second job to show you how to do that one, or I can do it live, but I'll catch up with Gareth then afterwards. So if you bear with me then, Chair, if you're happy, I'll stop the recording, and then we'll remove the public.
Thank you. I'll draw the meeting.
Session.
I'll draw the meeting to a close then. Thank you to anyone who's watching this, and I hope you enjoyed our meeting.